living in the moment, and the moment is the future.
With Pam and John. This is SPEDTalk.
Welcome to SPEDTalk with Pam
and John,
also known as The Calm.
Before the Storm.
Our purpose is to elevate the conversation and amplify special education resources.
And our why is all about the kids. You know, Pam, there are so many organizations and people around Texas who are just making it happen for kids with disabilities.
So let's make this a platform to celebrate their efforts, because special education is about making the impossible possible.
Hey, Pam.
Hey, John.
Hey, so what'd you think of that transition from the parking garage into the convention center?
Well, we're such a brain trust that we couldn't get out of the parking garage into the building without help. So I'm not sure what that means or what it says about us.
So driving down from Moody Bank, it took us probably twice as long to drive from there to here, to park in the parking garage, to go up 2 different elevators to make it into this building than if we would have just walked. But what we avoided was the heat and the humidity. So maybe we got it right.
We might have gotten it right, John.
Well, listen, we are
Let's go.
so excited. We're back in Austin. Amy, what do you
here. It's awesome.
think? This is
Awesome, Austin.
another episode of SPED Talk, and we've got a lot of people in the room with us today. We're so excited to be here at the 43rd annual TAVAC conference. And why don't we go around the room and we can all say who's in the room.
Okay. My name is Vickie Mitchell. I'm with Sam Houston State University, the Garrett Center on Transition and Disability Studies.
Okay.
Pam Humphrey, your host for SPEDTalk.
I'm Kayla Daniel with Education Service Center Region 12.
I'm Susie May, and I'm with the Texas Education Agency as the state transition coordinator.
And I'm Townsley Tayebianpour. I'm a transition specialist with Region 4 Education Service Center in Houston.
And I'm Corinna Cole. I'm a professor, associate professor at Sam Houston State University, and I am also part of the Garrett Center on Transition and Disability Studies.
And I'm Amy Rogers from Region 9, Pam and John's partner.
And I'm John. And here we go. Thank you guys for coming in and being part of this episode.
Oh, you're welcome. We're glad to be here.
Well, we're excited. This is important work. I mean, you guys have been working real hard for quite some time now. And I think in some instances, people don't know that you've done so much work on these efforts. And so can you talk a little bit about the network, the transition network, the title of the network, and really the purpose and the mission?
Absolutely. The name of the new network now is the Student Centered Transitions Network, and it's an S on transition. And the reason why is because it looks at transition now from birth to adult.
Yeah.
Same thing that we do as parents and grandparents, aunts and uncles.
Sure.
We don't wait until age 14. We start thinking the moment that child is born.
Yeah.
And so as a state, we acknowledge that. And it has become a national and international movement. And so we were just delighted when we saw that became the Texas Education Agency's vision.
Yeah.
Because it was like, all right, this is something that has been done in pockets throughout Texas. And so now what they did was give the state the opportunity to operationalize that concept and make it consistent across the state.
Yeah, I love that.
So with the early transition, so you're saying from birth to, I guess, entering school and after school, after they entered school.
Yeah.
So can you give us an idea of what you all are thinking for us on the early side of transition?
And first of all, I want to say that we've coined early to exit.
Early
So,
exit.
early
Okay.
so
exit.
that's kind of the mindset that we have. But for starters, we're looking at the transition from the IDEA Part C to B transition. So that the ECI is really under another entity. They're housed over at the Health and Human Services. And so as we take those children into Part B, we want a smooth transition to that. And then onward through exit.
Okay, so for our audience who might not know, so ECI is?
I'm sorry, another acronym, Early Childhood Intervention. And I also mentioned IDEA, which is individuals with Disabilities Education Act.
And so how is, I know that the ECI, the early childhood interventions, and that transition from, up to 3 prior to school age, and then after 3 entering our public school systems, except for some exceptions, I guess, for students, I guess it's maybe with deaf and hard of hearing and some of the stuff that starts earlier in regards to public school. But how is it, what's different? Because in some ways, I think we've had these expectations that there be a smooth transition between those. But now is it just this network is explicitly focusing on that transition to ensure that maybe we're looking at it from a different lens, or we're providing more support for that transition?
Well, what we're looking at is what exists as well as what needs to exist.
Okay.
So if I'm a teacher in a school district, what does that look like? Well, it piggybacks on what Susie was saying about the transitions from the ECI when they leave those services under Health and Human Services, move into us at the school district level, and then through early childhood special education, elementary, the secondary years, and then those years of the ages 18 through 21. So that kind of gives you the long view of it. But for me, as an early childhood special ed teacher or an elementary teacher, how is it that I fit into the concept of transition, from birth to exit? Well, what we're looking at there is we're looking at those students who enter the public school with a disability that we need to provide the parents that information on how to connect to the agencies.
Yes.
Because those parents who are already within the agency systems that have, especially if they have a wait list, then by the time they get to secondary, the supports that the parents have, it coupled with what the school districts do, it provides them what they need outside of public school to really take advantage of what we're doing, in addition to build that better life after they leave us. Because the greatest fear for a parent is after the education system is gone, it's them. And so that's one of the things that we can do by providing that information when those children are very young. But there's also pieces of our special education paperwork that we can take a different look at. Some of the examples that we talk about is there's a long name to it, but informally we tend to think of it as the Autism Supplement. But when you look at the sections on the Autism Supplement, there's one that's called Futures Planning. Well, futures planning, sometimes if I'm an elementary special ed teacher, I look at that and I think, well, that's secondary, so that's an NA right there. Well, it's really not an NA, but the question is, what is the disability that child has? What's, are they out in the rural area? Are they in the suburban area? How can we help the parents to get the information they need to not only connect with the agencies, but begin to think about those skills and behaviors that lead to better results later? And sometimes, even as teachers, we don't always think about the fact that in the classroom, that a child who's able to follow directions, stay on task, learn to ask for help, I think of those as an elementary teacher, a skill that's needed to be successful in my classroom. John, I can see that same skill list if I looked at the Department of Labor and the skill set that makes a successful employee.
Isn't that the truth? And I know we've talked a little bit about that in previous episodes, but that idea of those soft skills and those communication skills and self-advocacy skills and being self-determined, and a lot of the things that many of our young adults are, I guess, leaving our schools and they haven't developed those skills. And so I think it's great that that's the focus of this network, is to ensure that we're looking at a much earlier time in the lives of these students as they enter our school systems, even before they enter them. So is there an intentional, or is there a focus on connecting with HHSC? Is there an arm to that in regards to strengthening those relationships with HHSC and then public schools? And because that's been a bit of a kind of a disconnect, I think, in the past.
Well, there's an MOU with TEA and HHS because of that. And so with the early childhood, so we have that in place, I think, and the players at the table there. And as we move forward, it's just to strengthen those collaborations.
Yeah.
And people, sometimes we'll, laugh. Why are we talking about transition when they're young children? But the playground, that's another area of soft skills, building relationships.
Absolutely.
Things like, they're worth your while as far as outcomes and just a lot of child development types of things.
And when you think about development and developmental theories, and we transition through our lives. I mean, I currently have my mom in my home right now, and she's in her mid 80s, and she's transitioning out of her home into our home, maybe temporarily, maybe not. We're making decisions, but we take that for granted. The transition never stops.
Absolutely.
So when we put boundaries around a concept like transition, whether it's federally mandated or at a state level, or, we run the risk of only doing that which it says in the law versus opening our minds to the reality that we see transition daily in our own lives. I'm not quite as young as I used to be. I don't like to admit that, but it's one of those things. It really is birth to exit, and exit could even be exit, and so,
Yes.
So it's really neat. Go ahead, Pam.
Okay, I was just going to ask Townsley. I'm not going to let her sit there and be quiet. So, working out at ESC and then working, with districts and, bringing this concept of transition to the elementary level, what do you foresee as being the challenge, or do you foresee a challenge?
Well, I think that, we have already had lots of challenges. And so that's what I think is really great about this network is that there's really some intentionality, bringing all those activities, bringing those conversations together, because by having the early childhood being, those transitions being a part of this network, it gives us that opportunity to do intentional collaboration. And not only the Student-Centered Transition Network, but we are just one of 10. We are just one of the 10 networks that the state of Texas has, put together with intentional activities. Because if you look at all of the other networks, the other 9 networks, in addition to us, we all have overlapping early childhood needs.
Sure.
So I think that the state has recognized the challenges that we've all been facing in those collaborations and bridging those gaps. And these, networks were it's not just a brainchild of TEA. This was actually intentional based off of feedback with parents. There were parent focus groups giving feedback about what their concerns were, what their needs were. And so, these new networks are born with intentional focus, activities and goals to really try to reach the needs of our parents. And so now we're actually able to work together to meet some of those goals and track the progress that we're making. We can collect data on those things, and we can actually overlap and provide resources together. So I think that, and whether you're working in the field of special education or whether you're working in career and technical education, we always kind of feel like we're in silos sometimes because you may feel, well, I'm the only person who's doing this in this room right now. So this allows us to have a lot more conversations about some of those challenges and really try to work together to see how we can kind of break down some of those silos and work together to determine what our parents need, what our students need, what our teachers, our boots on the grounds need, what our administrators need. So I think, in the early childhood realm, I think everybody's been, wanting more collaboration. So I think this network is really going to give us the ability to reach out, provide more training and resources because the need's there. But now we actually have, that intentional focus and the ability to support all of those people out there that have been doing the work.
So how long has this network, or have the networks been in development? Like the transition from the previous networks, I think there was 16 in Texas, they said before, and now we've kind of reconfigured a few of them and then kind of changed some things up. We have now 10 networks in Texas. And I guess 2 questions. One is, when did this work that this group of people is working on right here in this room, when did this begin for you? Where are you at this point? And are there pieces of maybe the old network, are there products, things that will carry forward, or is this just a clean break and a start over?
That's an excellent question, and I'm glad you're giving us the opportunity to share with your listeners. The Student-Centered Transitions Network under the 10 networks is a new one, but it's not a new one. So there was a transition in Texas prior to this. It's existed for a very long time. As the the previous network, Transition in Texas, existed, it was the transition specialist consultant from each of the 20 ESCs, along with the Texas Education, person who is the support person for the network.
Mhm.
And it was organized and run by Region 11, which did an amazing job. And has been a big part of our support system as the new network was created. When the Texas Education Agency looked at trying to find a better way to meet the needs of the stakeholders in Texas, and Townsley did a beautiful job of operationalizing what the purpose of that was. The letter of interest, which was put out, we looked at it and we saw all the different things that were being provided as an opportunity for somebody to jump in and to apply to lead the new network, because it did change considerably. And they opened it also to universities to apply, as well as ESCs, Education Service Centers. And so all being transition people in the Garrett Center, and some of us had worked for ESCs, we saw this as a wonderful opportunity. So we jumped in and decided to apply. So that really is when the initial work started, because as we began to write the plan, we recognized that with Texas as a big a state as it is, and so diverse from top to bottom, side to side, that number one, it needed it needed a big group of people who could take this and run with it for the state. And so Sam Houston State University, because we had done a lot of work around the state, we had relationships around the state, and we looked at also all the different things that we were going to be trying to do to help teachers, help students and parents, and thought, how do we make this how do we do this in such a way that we don't overwhelm people? Well, if we were asking all 20 of the ESCs to jump in and help develop all this stuff, in addition to everything else that they were doing, it could be done because great people. But how can we help them to help the people that they serve? And we knew that there were a lot of great things going on at all the ESCs. So we picked some that matched some of the things that were being requested by the Texas Education Agency. So as a result, we wound up with the leadership team of the Garrett Center at Sam Houston State University, and some of the people that you have listened to here, like Townsley Tayebianpour at Region 4 and Kayla Daniels at Region 12 in Waco, which John is from.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, how did you know that?
Yeah, I get around, John. And so then we also have Elizabeth Danner, Region 11, Sam
13,
Gonzalez,
13.
excuse me,
13,
13, yes. Sorry, Elizabeth. Elizabeth Danner at Region 13, Sam Gonzalez at Region 20, and then Sandy Cox from Region 10. And so we contacted those people and we said, guys, Texas is big and we need you. Would you join us as part of just the worker bee team to help take all these great things that are being done around the state and then put them together, and then so that the ESCs can have as many materials and resources as they can to then go out and help them do the job, but also to give all the teachers. We are always out there looking for stuff, and we spend half of our time looking for it.
Absolutely.
And if we could spend it using it, that'd be so much better.
Wouldn't that be?
Yeah, so that's our goal, is to try and do that. Now, it won't be accomplished in 1 year, but we're going to get a big start here. So the network has existed for a long time, but now it's been retooled to serve a bigger focus. But then as Susie May from the Texas Education Agency was saying a little bit earlier, and Townsley mentioned it, we're going to be tapping into all those other networks too, because as Susie said, transition, it hits everything.
Absolutely.
It hits the technology people. It hits the progress in the general curriculum. It hits it hits everybody, the rural, the small, every one of us here, transition people, we know, and your listeners know, the hardest, the most difficult ones are the ones that are out there in those small and rural districts. Because if you're the only game in town, it's, where am I going to get you a job?
That's right.
So
it's difficult. Things like transportation, and I know in Region 12, it's interesting. You think Texas is such a large, diverse state, but really and truly, we're a state of rural and these rural and these small districts interspersed across with a few big ones here, a few mid-sized ones there. But it's amazing how many small and rural districts we have, and really, so every region has the small and
Yes, I
rural
do.
need.
Yes. And in fact, Kayla Daniel, who's here from Region 12, your stomping ground.
Yes, ma'am.
That's a focus of hers, as well as the military readiness.
Yeah.
And Kayla's got some great things going on with that.
Yes.
One thing that we've looked at as a state, we've looked at college and career readiness for our students in some depth, and we're expanding that considerably. But one thing we haven't looked at as much is military readiness. And so that is going to be a focus for us, is to see what hurdles or what barriers may exist for our students with disabilities who may want to enlist, and see if we can help overcome those and help create pathways and close the gaps so that they have a better opportunity to get enlisted and serve our country just like everybody else.
Yeah.
Kayla, share with them what you're getting ready to do with the self-determination and the student-led IEPs. That's awesome.
Well, Dr. Michael Waymeyer, who has 20 years of research and is the, I think, uncontested leader in this field, is personally going to develop products and materials for us that we can roll out to districts. Isn't that incredible?
That's
For the
exciting.
state of Texas. I mean, yeah. So when we say we want to be a leader in the nation, in this field, we definitely have the people in place to do it.
So if you are a special ed director out in the field and you're thinking about, hey, I've been thinking about doing this student-led ARD thing, or I've been thinking about building those self-determination skills, it sounds like now's the time to take some risks and to start trying some of those things.
And we will be providing you with the tools to do it.
Yeah.
The materials, so you don't have to, build your own plane. We're going to give you the blueprints and the tools to make that happen for your kids.
And we're trying, self-determination was added to the law in the last legislative session. And so we are still trying to build resources and information to help parents understand more about self-determination so that those ARD committees can have meaningful conversations about self-determination skills. Because I haven't met a student, let alone an adult, that doesn't have an area of self-determination that we couldn't use additional training and resources to develop, right? Self-determination is one of those things that we all need. And I wanted to go back to early childhood for just a minute, just to talk about and talking about leaders in the nation. I would be remiss if I didn't, since we're sitting with Dr. Vickie Mitchell in the room. She is one of the gurus of transition, also nationally, and pretty much anything I learned about transition, I learned from this wonderful person right here, Dr. Vickie Mitchell. So just to go back, I really, since you have listeners here, I would love, because the one thing, if anybody knows anything about Dr. Vickie Mitchell, it's that she helps people understand what transition is. And she has a simple way of doing it, and by having us focus on what the future looks like, what adulthood looks like. So since she's sitting here, Vickie, do you want to talk a little bit more about just kind of how you have trained all of us to start thinking about transition differently? So for early childhood, so in transition, for all of those teachers and parents, we've really been kind of sending your message of, the first day of adult life starts, right? That last day that you're exiting, we should already have all those things in place. And so as we work with those early childhood specialists, leaders, parents, students, we really want to start earlier having parents understand what we're working toward. So since we have a few minutes, I would love for you to impart that wisdom that we all have learned.
Townsley, so sweet. If I can do that without crying. I have to give the credit to the Texas Education Agency, actually, because professionally I grew up in transition right after the 1990 law was passed. And at that time, the Texas Education Agency did what now they're doing, have been doing, but really this new focus with bringing in all these national experts. And I had the pleasure of sitting and listening to Dr. Lou Brown, and he taught us about how to work with students with significant disabilities or more challenging disabilities and support needs in our classroom. And he kept saying, you cannot place and train, you cannot train in place, because if you keep trying to train a student that has bigger challenges and then place them, you'll be training until they leave. And we also know that the way that they learn is they learn by doing.
Mhm.
And so if you really want them to learn, then you have to place them where they're going to learn it and where they're going to do it.
Yeah.
And so he completely changed it around. And then 1990 came around and the Texas Education Agency funded the ESCs to bring in people like Dr. Ian Pumpian and Mary Falvey, all the people who actually began to create the tools nationally for transition. And I was in a district in the Region 4 Education Service Center area and had the fortune to be brought in to become part of the team to develop the state model. But I also at that particular time, I had a daughter with a learning disability. And so I was learning this from the perspective of a parent, as well as a person who had been a general educator and a special educator. And I recognized and I learned from all those wonderful people in my life that it's got to be a building block and you have to start early.
Mhm.
You can't do things for kids, always do it for them. And then suddenly at the age of 13 or 14, say, okay, now as of today,
Yeah.
I would like for you to learn how to help yourself. It doesn't start that way.
Right.
It starts that way with that 1-year-old.
Yeah.
You keep looking at what am I doing for my child that he needs to do for himself? Not that he can. It's that he needs to either now or someday.
Yeah.
And so then how do I begin to teach those skills and give them the opportunity to practice and also understand that when I do that, I have to allow them to fail. Because every one of us sitting in here has failed. The difference was we got up.
Yeah.
But did we get up because we instinctively got up? Or did we get up because we had a special person in our life who helped us get up, dust off the dirt, get our crying over and said, but John, I know you can do this. Sometimes it was parents, sometimes it was a teacher. And I've had the brilliant opportunity to work with all these people here in this room, you know, all the way from Amy to Corinna to Townsley to Susan to Kayla to Pam and John
now
getting to
me.
know you.
Yeah.
Yes. And,
Don't encourage him, please.
Well, listen, I've skinned my knees quite a few times growing up.
Yeah.
I made plenty of mistakes and I fell down a lot, but
Yeah.
there were those people that came into my life that lifted me up and that saw things in me that I didn't see in myself and that didn't do for me when I wanted them to do for me. And it did lead to me being gritty,
Yes.
to me being able
Yes.
to,
Yes. Angela
overcome.
Duckworth, grit.
That's right. That's
Mhm.
right. I'm listening
Yes.
to that on
Oh,
Audible
yes.
right
If
now.
people
So,
have
for the
not
second
heard that
time.
on TED Talk, go
Wonderful.
to Angela Duckworth.
Yes.
Duckworth and Grit, yes. But see, the people like Townsley and like all these Kayla and Corinna, all these wonderful people here, they're doing the same thing I'm doing.
Yeah.
They're finding people and they're teaching them what they know because that is what we do. In this room right here, we might not be the teachers of children, but we are now the teachers of teachers.
Yes.
And so we have to help them go out and really make a difference.
Yeah, I love that. And I love, even in Region 12, there are so many people that you've impacted. And one of those is Lori Tressel.
Oh,
She
I know
just
her well.
loves you.
Oh, I
And
love her
Laura
too.
and
Hello.
Lori and I are dear friends, and we work a lot together in Region
Yes.
12, and kind of in that leadership perspective of growing your teams and building organizational capacity. And it's so exciting to see her doing student-led ARDs, and we had the opportunity to come to TCASE and share kind of the work she's doing there in Conley ISD, building capacity in her staff, but also using the resources that are available to build an understanding in the students with disabilities so they can be more self-determined, so they can be more aware of their needs and not just their needs in a negative way, but in a positive way, those strengths, the things that they can do well.
Yes.
And so it's I've seen firsthand a little bit of that legacy. And so thank you very much for that. It's
wow.
powerful.
It's people like Laurie and Amy and Townsley and Kayla, all these people, they're the ones who are doing it. They did the hard part. All I did was share what I learned, and now I watch them sharing what they learn, and it's fun because I won't be here forever. I've been doing this a long time, and that was another reason why when I saw that TEA opportunity, I got with the team at the Garrett Center, and then Townsley's the first one I called and said, "We got to do this.
We got to get this thing done." Yes,
this is an opportunity.
Yeah,
so
that's fabulous.
Well, I just wanted to also add something about the opportunity that you have given me to join the group and kind of talk about the differences that children not only have because they have a disability, but because they come from a different culture and a different language. And it's not necessarily just because the tests are available in their language that they're going to be valid or that the parents are going to follow because we are going to just give them instructions and give them recommendations. But the value of doing that, focusing on the culture where they come from. So
that
thank
is
you.
so big. Yeah. Absolutely.
So the value of looking at that part of the child, where they come from, what are their parents? Let's say, for example, if we're going to give them recommendations and we're talking to them about, from our lens, from our, the mainstream culture recommendations, you need to have your child be independent, and they don't want their children to be independent. So I come from the background of assessment. I train bilingual diagnosticians at Sam Houston State University, and I really appreciate Vickie, asking me to join this from the beginning in the Garrett Center, because all of the tools that we have at the Garrett Center website, we're looking at, and we have begun translating them into Spanish for the ones for the parents, then for the students. We have tools and we have information for educators, for teachers. Well, educators and teachers are the same, for parents and for the students. But the value of looking at, like I said before, not necessarily just doing a translation and that's done. Okay, so now I accomplished it. But looking at the rest of the story. When we train bilingual diagnosticians or people who are going to do assessments for children who don't speak English, we need to just look at the validity of the results, even when we test them in both languages. Are the results that we're getting results of their cognitive and achievement abilities, or are they filtered through the language acquisition? Is it do the results match their language proficiency? Things like that. But one of our charges here with the network is also looking at assessments for the Zaro Center, the University of Oklahoma, Kendra Williams Dime. We're going to be working with her and to develop those assessments to be able to draft IEPs that make sense for the students and the goals. So hopefully, we will also be able to emphasize that cultural aspect and the language aspect of those assessments.
Okay, I have a question.
Okay.
So, because I have a transition background, so
Yes.
I'm thinking about. I got the early part. I know the high school part. I know the post high school part. I'm going to narrow right into the elementary part, because for elementary teachers who have never really thought about transition, as you had said, Vickie. So what do you kind of envision that's going to look like for them? Because you're going to have your secondary people who will be on board. You have your ECI people or your early childhood people who are going to be on board. That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, because they're used to doing this. Now we're going to a population of teachers where the T word really never existed. And so now we're saying, hey, we got to look at transition for elementary age students. And I'm just throwing this out there. Anybody can take this thing.
Well, and something that I always talk to elementary educators about is, we talk about transition, but I try to empower elementary educators in understanding what self-determination is, because we're already teaching self-determination when students come in at 3, 4, 5, they're in kinder, they're in first. You are working on self-determination skills. You just may not identify what you're doing. So are you giving students choices? Absolutely. That's choice making. That's part of self-determination. Are you having students set goals in 3rd grade? Yes, absolutely. That's part of self-determination. So you can't really really have successful transition outcomes if you don't also have self-determination. And so for us to really start working with, elementary educators, middle school educators, intermediate educators, and helping us kind of build those bridges between transition, self-determination is the best thing that we can do. And so as the network, as Kayla talked about, we're going to be working with a guru in self-determination, Dr. Michael Waymeyer, to help us kind of build some modules, some trainings, and things like that. But for anyone listening out there, if you're working with an elementary educator, you don't have to wait for the network. I mean, whoever you're with, if you're with elementary educators, build in a self-determination, component. Let's talk about self-determination, because part of the issue right now with helping people understand self-determination is that not everyone's familiar with that word right now. And even if you're familiar with the word, you don't necessarily understand what all the components of self-determination are. People hear self-advocacy all the time, but don't necessarily understand that self-advocacy is part of self-determination. So really, self-determination is all of those self-words, right? So it's self-regulation, but it's also choice-making, problem-solving, goal-setting, all of those different things. And it's already embedded in a lot of the TEKS, right? So if you look at first grade TEKS, you look at second grade, choice-making, problem-solving, that is already embedded in what we do. So starting to help educators understand the word self-determination, so that then we can go back and look in the classroom and look at the lesson that we're doing today. Am I working on self-determination today if we're working on problem solving? Absolutely. So when I go to that ARD meeting with that parent, in first grade, I can talk to the parent about what we're doing in the classroom that is actually also self-determination. So if we start helping elementary educators and parents understand what self-determination looks like in the classroom, where we're already teaching self-determination, then we can help identify areas where students can improve their self-determination skills. Because if parents are already familiar with self-determination in elementary school, then it's very easy for us to continue building those self-determination skills when they go on, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade. We can continue to build it. So by the time we get to high school, we've already done the self-determination thing. So we're just filling in the gaps now. We're not starting from ground zero working on self-determination. We understand what self-determination is. Because the other side of that coin is that parents also teach self-determination, but don't necessarily understand, all of the different things that they can do at home, starting at, when you're 6 months old. I mean, there's some things that parents can do. And again, when you start to give your children choices at home, and so also giving those elementary educators those tools to help parents understand what self-determination looks like in the home. So through our work, with Dr. Waymeyer, and just kind of helping educators understand that really self-determination, if we can start to identify that, label that, and continue to build the capacity in self-determination, then that's really what is going to give our students those successful outcomes, which is transition from grade to grade. But once you get from, that high school to that adulthood transition, that's your ability to be self-determined is really the thing that's going to guarantee your success in life.
So how do we know that? Well, like Townsley talks about Dr. Michael Waymeyer, well, self-determination is an evidence-based practice. And the research on it says, and I'm going to paraphrase it, that students with disabilities who have self-determination skills are more likely 1 year after high school to be in competitive employment or in a post-secondary education or training program 3 years after high school. They're more likely to, in that employment, have moved into a job with benefits, upward mobility, but in the post-secondary education training, either complete it or be close to complete it. And we know how important that is, for us as adults to be able to support ourselves. But you know what? We knew that before Michael Waymeyer did the research, because we went to our 10-year high school reunion and we looked at those people who were the really smart ones, and I didn't fit in that category. And I thought, well, you know what? It was the people who knew how to take the loss, who knew how to work hard, who
navigate
knew
the
how,
world.
How to fall down and get back up.
Yes. And so you don't have to have a disability to need self-determination. It is what works. And that student who leaves public school, it's kind of like Townsley was saying. I mean, transition is to help students be prepared for life after public school. And the question is, and that's what the IEP planning is all about. The question is, what's that going to look like? Because as Corinna said, it's different for everybody.
And if
Kayla?
it's not, oh, I'm sorry. And if it's not part of that written document that you take to the IEP meeting, if it's not part of that full and individual evaluation summary, if nothing in that summary says, look at transition when the child is 3, when the child is 6, I think that's, in my view, because I teach educational diagnosticians, and we talk a lot about what does that look like in your FIEs, and they say, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's NA.
Right,
Yeah, that's,
And Vickie
unfortunately in practice
Mitchell,
it has been.
You have been a proponent of adding that in the IEP,
Yeah.
in the FIE.
And so, to me, I hear and I'm global and abstract in how I think about things, but I hear that it sounds like the concept or the definition of transition is kind of broadening and widening, and we're trying to encompass more of a child's life, really tethering it to every aspect of a child's life. It could be transitioning from first grade to second grade. It could be transitioning from the bathroom to the classroom. It could be transitioning from home to school. It could be it's like, let's think about transition as like this is happening all day, every day in the life of everyone. For students with disabilities, they need more opportunities to build those skills like self-determination in order to do so successfully.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you're right, it is. The transition is horizontally as well as vertically, because you have the transition as you have the upward mobility within the school system. But you have the horizontal transitions when the student leaves the school to go home, when they go from home out into the community. What skills do they need? What kind of support do they need? How can I help them learn how to have support that doesn't require me as a school district person or require somebody who is paid? How can I help develop those natural supports?
Yeah.
Because if I don't understand the horizontal and the vertical transitions, then I'm going to have a student who meets graduation requirements and exits public school, and we haven't really addressed what in transition we call the coordinated set of activities. It's not supposed to just be a list of things that you meet because it's in federal law. It's federal law for a reason.
Right.
And that reason is it is what builds that horizontal and vertical. And so it's supposed to be just those pieces that help plan out the activity. But that's another thing with the new network, the Student-Centered Transitions Network, is we are really trying to look at how do we build capacity in all of our stakeholders. So one of the things that we are developing, there are a few products that will be developed this year, but we will continuously develop them in future years so that there are more that are available to teachers, but what we call bundle training. Because if I am the parent and you are the teacher and Amy is the student, if we're looking at, let's take, for example, transition assessment. If I'm the only one who understands what it is and what it's for and how to use it, then how am I going to get what in the law we call meaningful involvement of the parent and input of the student?
Exactly.
It becomes a piece of paper.
Right.
And so if I have an assessment, if I have a bundled training of assessment, that there's one that's for me as the teacher to understand what it is, how to do it, but also that I don't just give it and now write an IEP. You as the student, that's your assessment.
Yeah.
You as a teacher, I would not want the principal to come and do the annual assessment and then not give me the results. Just go ahead and write up the report.
Right.
Exactly.
I need to, because how else am I going to teach you self-determination if I don't say to you, let me tell you what I found in this assessment that you took. But I have to also make sure that it's strengths-based.
Yes.
You don't need to hear everything that's wrong. You already know that. You know that you're struggling.
I just love that.
And if you're the parent of the child that has more significant disabilities, you already know that your child is struggling and you're worried about life after public school. So we've got to move to a strengths-based, and we've got to move to where you recognize your strengths and you know that I value your strengths.
Yeah.
And I think that what you're thinking your strengths are is, hey, you're right, that is a strength because it validates you and it helps you to move on. And so, but then as the parent, that parent knowing how to have input. And so the bundle training, it will start this year, and the transition assessment is one of the ones. So then the question would be, if it's going to meet the needs of all students, then I have to recognize that I'm going to have some students who might be in a special education classroom all day or most of the day. That's pretty easy for me to, train them. But what about those students who are in full inclusion? How do I get the information to them? So that's something that we're working on, so that we can try and have something that it's short, need to know, kind of like what you guys are doing here with the podcast, but it's accessible to the parent and the student, and it's not cumbersome, but exactly what it is that they need to know.
Yeah.
The other product and resource that we're developing that is a bundle training is the video modeling. Because the video modeling, I mean, we use it all the time because we use it to learn how to put something together.
Sure.
I recently learned how to use it to put together my iRobot that I ordered.
Yeah. YouTube. You can learn how to do anything on YouTube.
I'm so impressed with myself. Yes. But I've decided I needed to get a dog because she's become too friendly.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, I need some company.
Oh, that's great.
But so that YouTube is like the video modeling.
Yes.
And so, but then I can use it if I'm the student to learn how to help myself.
Yes.
We use it. In fact, Ryan Kellums from Brigham Young University is going to be doing this for us. He's considered one of the premier authorities on video modeling in special education, especially in the area of transition. And so we use video modeling to help a student to be able to see what it is they're getting ready to do, so they know what it looks like and how to do it.
Yeah.
But they can also use it for self-monitoring. They can use it to look back after they finish, to evaluate what they did. I'm looking at this video right now, then I'm going to look at what I did. Did I accomplish it?
Absolutely.
But we'll also have a version, so there'll be the version for the teachers, how to use it in the classroom for the academics, not just for, the vocational and transition, but also for the academics. But we'll have one for the parents. How, as a parent, can I begin to use this? Because if I have a child who's struggling with learning how to brush their teeth or getting to bed, what are different ways that I, as a parent, can begin to use this?
Yeah.
Or support what's happening in the classroom. But me in the classroom, support and supplement. There's so many, different ways that can be supportive of each other.
Sure.
So the bundle training again with the video modeling. So
And
we're pretty excited about that.
When are
concept.
those due to come out? Or will they come out cyclically kind of?
Yes.
Yes.
Throughout the year. The fall basically is a lot of the planning, because we're getting input from students from around the state on these different resources that are being developed, as well as the ESCs and working with these national specialists. And so then as this gets developed, they'll be completed in the spring.
Okay.
So some of them will be completed by the end of this year. Some are ready for the beginning of year 2. And then we're going to continuously build on that library of bundled training.
And then those will be accessible through the network's website, or is that what it'll be?
Yes, yes. The teacher training, when it first starts, it'll roll out to the ESCs, the Education Service Centers. And then the Education Service Centers there'll be a variety of ways that they'll use them. They can use them using Zoom, so that they can get out to all these teachers who are not able to make it into the service center. They can have it where they have the bundle training face-to-face, and then it's almost like a professional learning community afterwards. How are we going to use this?
Yeah.
And then how are we going to get this out to our students and our parents? Because we not only have to make it available to them, we have to make sure they know it exists.
Sure.
And that they see that it will be useful.
Yes.
Because I am motivated to use something if I know it's going to make my life better and
Totally.
easier. And so we have to know how we get that across.
Yeah.
And if we do it right the first time, then our parents and students will be looking for more information, and they'll
yes.
know that when we get out another, product and resources for them, that, hey, that was useful last time. I just heard there's another one. Let me check it out.
That's right. Yeah.
Hey, John, Kayla's been pulling on my shirt. I think she has something to say.
You're still intact.
I'm
though,
still
so we're
intact.
good.
I'm still
We're good.
yeah.
I just want to say we have got incredible educators in the classrooms and on the campuses, but I think sometimes we're our own worst enemy because we have such passion and compassion for our kids that when we see them struggle, we want to do for them and we want to help them and want to end that struggle because it hurts our hearts.
Yeah.
But the learning is in the struggle. And I think we have to look at opportunities for, when you see our kids struggling with things that they're going to need to know and be able to do to successfully transition to, like Pam was saying, whether it's in elementary or to middle or high or after, things that they will need to know that will serve them well going on. If this is something they'll never need to use again, fine, let's help them. But if they might use it again tomorrow, then let's teach them. And I do think that takes more, it takes more time and teachers. But again, I think the biggest part is just that our hearts hurt when we see our kids struggle, but we have to embrace them and help them through the struggle.
Absolutely.
And to piggyback off of that, I've heard parents, I mean, they're the same way. They love their kid. They don't want them to struggle. It hurts them to see them in the struggle. And then one day they wake up and they're a junior and it's like, what do I do now? What do I do now? And that is heartbreaking. Of course, I always tell my parents, it's never too late. It's never too late. You can start, but
Building
the earlier
skills.
you start, the better it is for everyone. And I was sitting in a district-wide meeting, just in a collaborative, and the parent was saying that she wouldn't have been ready at 7th grade for her child to be thinking about life after high school. And I thought, oh, the work we've got to do. Because really and truly, that should be the thought from the time they, like you said, Townsley, from the time they enter school. And so it's kind of a paradigm shift in thinking because most parents don't ever think about what if I'm not there. And so transition, I've been accused that of I think that transition begins in the womb. And I do.
And there's a saying of the days are long and the years are short. And personally, I raised 4 kids, and really and truly, if they turn 18 before you know it. And
I've got 4 little ones at home, and 3 are still young, 12, 11, and 9. But I swear I look up and these kids are aging so quickly, and blessed to have great kids, but there's days where I need them to do a little bit more for themselves. So Dr. Mitchell, I may get you over to my house. I may get you to come train me. So that's what I've been missing.
You can access the video.
Well, that's what I'll do. So get me on that list.
I got a form for you too.
Well, good.
Think through it.
We'll look through it and figure it out.
Parents are transitioning just like the children,
Yes.
just like we were
That's a
talking
great
about.
point.
So
It's a great point.
And I think another good point with this network is that several of us are raising or have raised children with disabilities.
Yes.
And so we have the parent perspective as well. And I did a really poor job of it. My kids are grown, but we're going to help other people do better.
And we'll have the grandchildren to fix them.
The grandchildren. I love that. Isn't that the truth? Yeah.
Okay. Thank you all. One thing I like to do as we wrap up is that I like it. It's a game I like to play, and it's called One Word. And one word is really, since we're talking about this new network, I want you to think about one word that would describe this network, or one word you would want people to know about the network and your feelings about it. It's your one word. So whoever wants to go first can say your one word and also the reason behind your one word.
If I start first, it'll be easier, right?
It is easier.
For me, collaboration. There is such tremendous collaboration among the members, among the state, among the agencies, among all the stakeholders. I've never seen such collaboration in an endeavor before.
Right.
I'll say communication. Collaboration is going to be my first word, but that's part of the 3 C's for success. And communication among everyone, parents and our students and our professionals and our interagencies and just everyone involved.
And it may seem like I'm cheating, but it's hyphenated, so it's still one word. Self-determination.
You can do that one.
Self-determination. It's got a hyphen.
Well, let's go to the judges. We'll take that. We'll accept
All
that.
right, it's accepted. And so, but self-determination, because again, you look at the name of the network, student-centered transition. So if we can do nothing else, we have to be student-centered. And so the best thing that we can do for any student, anything that we do, is give them self-determination skills.
Yes. And I would say capacity. And the reason why is because a parent who feels like things aren't getting done at school wants, and they go to all these trainings to get what they need to know, they can't do it by themselves.
Absolutely.
I, as
So
the
true.
teacher, I can go to all the trainings I want. I can't do it by myself. But the parent and myself as the teacher, we can't do it just the two of us.
Right.
It is the life of that student. So building capacity across the board, all the way from the three main players to the stakeholders. And the stakeholders are not just their agencies and community
Yeah.
employers. It's our principals.
Oh, yes.
It's our teachers, our general ed
Absolutely.
teachers. It's our support people. It's everybody. So capacity.
Yeah.
I was thinking along more or less the same lines, helpful. It's going to be helpful across the board.
Yeah.
So that would define it for me.
Do we get to do a word?
You get to do work.
I got a word. My word that it just can't get out of my head is opportunity. I think that, maybe I'm just an optimist, Pam. I don't know. I drive Pam crazy sometimes. But I feel like so many of the changes that are occurring in Texas and so many of the changes that are occurring in education and some of it's been difficult. We've had a few years of a lot of people struggling in our state, and we've had educators and students and families, I think, struggling. But I just see this as such an opportunity. I feel like history is in the making right now in Texas. I feel like we're going to look back in a generation from now and realize that we had a small part in changing the future, really, for a more positive outlook. And so for me, it's the opportunities that this network will create through the work. But I think, too, it's just this time period that is brought upon this network it's an opportunity for us to really feel like our life's work has really, really led to great things for empowering others to have wonderful lives. So mine's opportunity.
Yeah, Amy?
Mine is possibility. And I have came up with something that let's start looking at the possibility instead of the disability and planning from strength. And so I get excited every time I hear about just the new ideas. They're really not new ideas, but to see action with the idea of this network.
Yeah.
Okay. And my word is endurance.
Yes.
Because as someone as I keep telling John, I'm fading out.
That's what she thinks.
Yes.
Yeah.
And who's worked in the area of transition most of my career, is that I know this will require endurance. Because you guys are really, okay, if I'm a words, you're going so many different angles with transition, and the state has never really gone so broadly with transition, and it's going to be a test. It's going to it's going to be a challenge, but all those pieces together, and it's going to be endurance. It's not a sprint, definitely, but it is so worth it. People ask me, why are you so passionate about transition? And I say it's because it's about people's lives.
Yes.
But we have people like you to tap into,
Yeah.
so we can run the race.
That's right. So Pam,
That was not really part of that, Kayla.
Pam keeps saying, I'm about to fade out. I'm like, yeah, you keep saying that, but we can't do SPEDTalk with John. Right? I mean, there needs to be Pam up in front of all that, right?
Everybody knows this really is SPEDTalk with John.
Come on now, that's a whole bunch of hooey. So,
Okay.
well,
But yes.
listen, this has been so fun and so purposeful. And I think that's a big part of the reason why Pam and myself and Amy feel like having a platform like this to celebrate the work and the people, the organizations, the efforts, and the resources really that are available in Texas. I believe we live in the greatest state in this nation. Yes. And I believe we live in the greatest country in the world. And we have opportunities here that many other countries don't have, and even other states don't have. And I feel like when you have a team like this coming together around this work, anything is possible.
Yes.
And so some of the things that we're recommending and that we're trying to achieve, they're not really that hard. We just got to get everybody moving in the right direction. And what a perfect team of people to do that. So thank you guys.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for inviting us.
Absolutely.
And if you, as you developing things, and if you want to, get back on SPEDTalk and just kind of do a shout out with us, we will.
We would love to have you
We'll
back.
share
Okay.
share with the audience.
We will
Sounds
take
great.
you up on that.
Well,
Yes.
guys, that's a
Thanks for
wrap.
having us.
To continue to elevate the conversation, hit us up on Twitter at SPEDTalk 2020, where you can find links to all of our episodes and each of the resources that we discussed today.
John, also links to the resources will be available at our podcast site.
And if you found these resources helpful, be sure to share them with a friend, because information should always flow through us, not to us.
That will do it for this episode of SPEDTalk.
And remember, courage creates culture and kindness keeps us connected.
Until the next time, I'm Pam,
And I've been John.
and this is
SPEDTalk.
Elevate the conversation.